Welcome to Across the Line. On this episode, we talk about the subject of naturalization. There has been a petition filed to try to get Bienvenido Maranon and Robert Lopez Mendy naturalized, and we talk about all of the factors involved in that and what effects that might have on the game here in the Philippines. If you like this episode and the football content that we provide here on Across the Line, please do subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and on Spotify. Don't forget to rate and review, and we hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to Across the Line. One of the biggest pieces of news that has come out during community quarantine has been the topic of naturalization. Two big players from Ceres Negras are being considered for naturalization in the Philippines. Bienvenido Maranon, who is the top scorer, all-time top scorer of the AFC Cup now, and a man named Robert Lopez Mendy, who has been in the country for quite some time. Chris Greatwich, how are you doing, sir?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
Doing all right. Still here during our community quarantine, but big news come out, surprising actually, that this process has been ongoing and is actually in an advanced state already. Senator Mig Zubiri has pushed forth this motion to try to get Bienvenido Maranon and Robert Lopez Mendy naturalized, which would make them eligible to play not only for the national team, but would make them Filipinos for Ceres Negros, which would allow them to get two more foreigners in their roster. Big news. What are your thoughts, Chris?
Well, first of all, how far down the line are they? What's the sort of the protocol from here on in with regards to the naturalization process for these two players? Are you aware of those protocols or not?
I wish I knew the specifics of it, but I understand that you need to be endorsed by a senator. Mig Zubiri, obviously, a lot of clout and in the Senate, and I don't see how they could run into any walls. You know, I recall Hans Smith, who had a naturalization process that he had to undergo. It was Pia Cayetano who endorsed him, and shortly after, he was then pronounced Filipino. So,
okay. So it can be quite a quick process then, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So that there it is. A Spanish national, Benvenido Maranon, has been in the country for at least 5 years. I believe that's one of the things that you have to fulfill. Obviously, Robert Lopez Mendy is married to a Filipina, has a kid who is half Senegalese and Filipino. And I think those are they hit sort of the requirements that allow you to file for a petition of naturalization.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, yeah, I'm conflicted with my feelings towards this this particular subject. Obviously, when I read it at first, it made a lot of sense because I know that, for example, in basketball, it's happened. Right, individuals have found a way to get naturalized and play for Gilas. Mendy's been in the country, like you said, for almost as long as I've been here. Probably 2013, 2014. It was when he first came, so he's been here for a number of years. Bienville came shortly afterwards, so I assume he's in. Maybe this might be his 5th year this year, potentially. So, yeah, in terms of eligibility to qualify for naturalization, okay, if that's the case, then they're well within their rights to assume that that naturalization document and potentially suit up for the Azkals. I've got no qualms with them doing that. Where I think it runs into some issues for me from a sort of ethical standpoint is we already have this moniker of being a country that plays foreigners, right? That is already a contentious issue, and not just with other countries in our region. It's a contentious issue actually within the footballing community and the Philippine community as a whole, right? So there has been some animosity between the Phil foreigners, which is a phrase that I dismiss, and homegrown Filipinos. There already has been a lot of chatter on social media, on various forums about the discontent and occasionally the ill treatment will play. Being said, I think there is a disparity between the overall level of the local players versus some of the players who were born and raised abroad. Some of those issues we've touched upon in other episodes. And is that the fault of players who are brought up here? It absolutely is not. They are at the mercy of the program that has been given to them by the federation, by their local football associations. And there are some exceptions, which we mentioned before, like your Jovan Bedics, for example, your Chiefy Caledongs. But by and large, it's going to be very, very difficult for them to compete on a level playing field with people who've grown up in England or Germany or Spain or Italy, for example, because they just have had the exposure to much higher level coaching, much better facilities, and ultimately a much better level of training and play. So where I think that problem then becomes exacerbated or escalates is we're sort of opening ourselves up now to other players naturalizing themselves. Right. So again, why would we invest money in a grassroots initiative when we can go and cherry pick players who've been in the Philippine Football League, who've been here for a period of time, and we can just naturalize them, right? Which is a far more cost-effective way of producing players to play for the national team than it is to actually go out there and invest in coach education, developing football fields, grassroots initiatives, which is going to take 5, 10, 20, 40, 50 years to implement and to see the fruits of the labor. So why not do it? Well, because it's not the right thing. You know, there should be an onus on spending and allocating resources to developing local footballers. And, you know, if I was a young up and coming Filipino player, I would be a little bit disappointed that, you know, they're going after guys in their 30s. I think they're both in their 30s. Correct me if I'm wrong with that.
Yep, they are.
You know, guys in their 30s to participate in national team competition. I don't know. That's the sort of the opposite side of how I'm feeling, because, you know, on the surface it's a great idea. You know, and because they're eligible to qualify for naturalization, so why not utilize them? I totally get that, and they're both great players. And they would absolutely enrich and enhance the national team, 100%. But from a moral and ethical standpoint, yeah, I'm not too sure where that sits with me. I'm very conflicted, as I said when you posed the question to me. Very conflicted indeed.
When the news initially came out, it was posted on social media forums. The general feel that I have garnered is that people are excited. People are excited to see what kind of firepower the Azkals will be able to put together with, you know, Mende and Bienville there, and rightly so. I mean, there's some big tournaments coming up, you know, with the Suzuki Cup and World Cup qualifiers around the corner, and people are starting to dream like what could be if these two are there. And the question is, though, what if we do succeed? What if we do win the Suzuki Cup this time around for the first time? And what if we make it far into our World Cup qualifiers, but we do have these two individuals who are technically not Filipino, right? I mean, you did mention that there has already been sort of this cloud hanging over the Philippines because of the utilization of, I hate to use the term, and I apologize for Phil foreigners, but now we have individuals who are actually don't have any connection, don't have any blood whatsoever to the Philippines. And to succeed then, what would that mean to the success that we garner down the road? How would people view that success?
Jing, hold on, mate. I've got low power mode on my battery here.
Uh-oh. Right, guys. Obviously, this is some of the things that we're going to run into
Technical
during
issues.
these recordings that we do far away from one another. We don't have the opportunity to record in our usual habitat. So we're doing the best that we can at the moment. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting little situation that we have because me personally, watching Robert Lopez Mendy up close, he's a beautiful human being. He's a lovely guy, and he's got some Filipino roots in him now that he spent so much time here. Personally, I know him, and I'd love for him to be able to represent the country. But there is that strange little caveat that we have to think about, especially also because of the fact that he will be taking a spot that could be placed for a homegrown player. As Chris mentioned, if you are an up-and-comer and you see somebody, the likes of Robert Lopez Mendy, getting a spot that you could be honed for, it could cause a bit of friction and a bit of loss of appetite to continue to push yourself to get into a spot in the Azkals. Bienvenido Maranon, it's difficult. There's really nothing you could say about his capabilities. He is the top scorer of all time in the AFC Cup. I mean, you could, whichever way you look at that, it's spectacular, a record. And obviously, he's Spanish, not married to a Filipina, but based on the statement that was put out by Mig Zubiri, he has intentions of living here and creating a family here in the Philippines. Good for him. Personally, I don't know him as a human being. I've not really gotten an opportunity to get to know him. I'm sure he's a lovely guy. But then, yeah, it raises that question of whether or not people will really be on board with the Azkals now that we're welcoming in naturalized players. Although this is not something that is foreign. Singapore has been doing it. China very recently has unveiled a few Brazilian nationals who are now Chinese. So it's not something that is strange in football. It's actually quite common, an occurrence.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we need to be clear about is almost all of our competitors at the Southeast Asian level have naturalized players on their rosters. Almost all of them.
Really?
Almost all of them. I mean, I've seen, obviously, Singapore have been doing it for years. I mean, the likes of Juric, Mustafik, Indonesia with Christian Gonzalez, right?
Yeah.
So nations that we've participated against have done it for a number of years. East Timor with their connection with the Portuguese and Brazilian players. Right. We've seen it so many times with some of these other countries. I'm struggling to think of one with Thailand. That they've similar to us. They've they have players of German origin, some players of British origin. Vietnam had the goalkeeper who I forget his nationality. Is he Russian? Is he? I might have got that completely wrong, but I know he's currently the goalkeeper at Montong, isn't he? And he's in the same team as Daisuke Sato. So our competitors have naturalized players or players from foreign born who've come to play for their national colours. But where I see there being some sort of issues is where does it all end? If Super lives here for 5 years, is Super going to come in? Is he going to play as a centre back?
I'm sure that's something that's already being considered.
Right, you know what I mean? And then it's all well and good us going, but until what point does this become a situation whereby we end up not being the Azkals as we know it, and it becomes just a foreign all-star 11? comprised of naturalized players who have played in the domestic league for an extended period of time, have been given the paperwork, and bang, there we go. You're eligible to play for the national team. And that, look, I'm going to be quite honest with you, and this is where it doesn't. I don't fully agree with that statement I just made, because for sure people were saying the same about me. For sure,
Right.
people were saying that with regards to me when I came here. Well, how many of these Phil foreign players are we going to let play? Because we need to allocate a certain number of players on the squad for guys born and raised in in Davao, or players who have come from Iloilo or who've been in the system in Manila. We can't have a whole team full of Phil foreigners. It just wouldn't be acceptable. But lo and behold, that is what we have now. That is barring Jovin, barring Amani, and Patrick Dato, pretty much it's been Phil foreign players or foreign-based, foreign-born Filipinos exclusively in the national team lineup for the last, I'm going to say, 10 years. So,
go ahead.
Yeah, so is this just a natural progression in the cycle, whereby we just naturalize players who've been in the Philippines for an extended period of time? Is that part of the cycle? Because this is the nature of the beast, right? This is the we've sort of gone down this route already with foreign-born Filipinos.
The interesting
but this is
argument.
A massive step. It's a massive step from just full-blooded Filipinos. Filipinos born in other countries to where we're at now. That is a massive, massive step. And, for me, it's, you're starting to go down a path which could be quite a slippery slope for the domestic game as a whole.
Right. I completely understand your point there. Interesting thing is, some of these guys, for example, Robert, and he could argue that he's more Filipino than some of these foreign guys who've not stepped foot here in the Philippines but are eligible to play. A lot of these guys who are coming in from abroad have not spent a lot of time in the country, have not assimilated to the culture, have not taken the opportunity to, find their roots here in the country. But because by blood they have that connection, they are eligible to play for the game. So who is more Filipino there? I mean,
that is a great argument. Great argument, Jing. Yeah, and that's, again, going back to my original point of, I'm not sure where I sit with this. I really don't know, because I totally agree with what you're saying there, and I think it's a great argument. Like you talk about a Singaporean national team. Mustafiq still lives there. He's finished, but he still lives there. Coaches at Tampines Rovers. Juric is super Singaporean. Like, he is Mr. Singapore. He absolutely loves the country. He's Mendy's the same. Mendy has been here for an extended period of time. He's married to a Filipino. His kid is Filipino. He's got a Philippine passport. So who is more Filipino? Very, 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 very good question. Very good question, and an argument that's really tough to argue against, because I think you're spot on with that. Is Robert Lopez Mendy more Filipino than Patrick Strauss, for example?
Right.
A very, very interesting point that you make with that. And again, it's where it brings it back to how diverse and complicated a question this is, because, man, that's a really difficult thing to try to quantify. Who is more Filipino than someone who actually is Filipino? Really difficult thing to try to dissect. I think you make a great point, really, really good point with that, Jing.
I think if the main thing that resonated with me, though, was your frustration with, what about the homegrown guys? What about their spots? What about their opportunities to come up and represent the national team? And I think, excuse me, if we're capable of producing high quality players homegrown, and you start seeing a lot more of them in the national team, then perhaps the perception towards the team won't be affected as much. If you have Bienville there, if you have Robert there, but you also have 5, 6, 7 players who are homegrown or were developed within the country, then perhaps the perception of the people won't be so much that, oh yeah, it's just a bunch of foreign guys putting on a Philippine flag. That perhaps could be some sort of saving grace for the country, because at the end of the day, you want your national team to sort of represent what your country has been capable of producing. I think that's
yeah,
what.
absolutely. Yeah, 100% spot on, mate. I couldn't agree more with that statement. I think one of the reasons why people are so disillusioned with the national team and disenfranchised from the national team is the fact that there is so little opportunity given to people across the board within the football world. And I think if there were initiatives to really try to engage with the local authorities, with the grassroots initiatives, with building relationships with the fans to create this more inclusive culture, then being more inclusive with naturalizing players would not be an issue at all. Would not be an
Right.
issue at all. I think you're very astute in that assessment, because I think that is more of the underlying undercurrent with regards to issues pertaining to the national team. It's not about field foreigners. It really isn't that. It's more about the fact that there is a distinct lack of opportunity for players who are from here. And although there is a disparity, what is being done to try to bridge that gap? And if we're going to go down the naturalization route, it's only going to get worse.
Right. Now I'm starting to miss your face here, Chris. Not that I don't like your profile picture, but any chance you could turn back your camera on, or?
But then I'm going to lose. Happen? But then I'm going to lose my mic, Jing. So
yeah,
that's the big issue. Yeah.
It's one or the other, huh?
Yeah. Do you want to see my face? Or want to hear my voice? I'm not sure which one I prefer.
Yeah, I think we'll stick with your voice at the moment. Then you'll be stuck with my face, but that's fine.
Much better.
Yeah, so it's an interesting conundrum that we find ourselves in. Obviously, if you're looking for just success and pushing as far above our weight as possible, then the inclusion of Robert Lopez, Mendy, and Benvenido Maranon is a no-brainer. They provide firepower in an area where we are lacking at the moment. Javier Patino is the only person that we rely on to sort of score the goals now that the young husband has retired. So they will provide that firepower, and in the immediate sort of term. You know what I mean? They are 33, around that, 32, 33 years of age. They're made to perform right now at this particular moment. And they could be the tools required to get us back onto the Asian Cup stage. So in that regard, as a football fan, I want us to be on that stage, But you make perfectly good points as well with regards to the affinity that people will have, not just us, but the casual folk. How can we rally everybody around this football team with that kind of knowledge in mind that it's, these two individuals from abroad who are going to push us onto those stages. So I think, now more than ever is going to be the challenge for our organizing bodies, the PFFs and our local leagues, is to push the quality upwards of those homegrown players. And how many can we get involved in and around that area of quality that is required to be now a part of the Philippine national team? I think it's a huge challenge that has been laid down to all of these aspiring footballers, that it's not just enough to be a standout in the UAAP. It's not just enough to be a standout in your club. You got to be reaching these types of levels now. And that's quite a challenge given the structure that we have in place at the moment.
I think the challenge will also be on a domestic front now, because what we haven't really touched upon yet is if you're now going to allocate these two superstars of the domestic game Filipino status, that will mean that they will be eligible to get 2 more foreign players
Oh,
in their place, which will make a super team already, you know, I would say nailed on to win this league, even more formidable. So from a domestic standpoint, it's going to make things very, very difficult for any other competitors. However, that being said, it will enable them to be far more competitive should they qualify for the AFC Champions League, which is the flip side to that, because now all of a sudden you can add in an additional 2 foreigners, and now you already seen that you can compete with the likes of the Thai Port. We're not a million miles away from some of these Chinese teams, based upon our experiences with the national team, and then obviously what we saw in the third qualifying round this time around. So from that perspective, again, night and day between the positives and negatives of, right, well, that's going to make the already heavy weighted PFL even more in the favour of series.
yeah,
Negative.
100%. 100%.
However,
man. I mean,
it's going to make for a very, very entertaining AFC Champions League, because I think with the addition of those 2 as Philippine players, supplement that with 2 really good foreigners to take their place, they could have a decent run, I think they could be decent at the AFC Champions League level for sure.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I mean, they like you said, we're not too far away. And if you can add 2 really good foreigners, they will be up there and battling against some of the very best clubs in Asia, which would be, as a fan, I would really want to see that. I really do want to see how they line up against these sides. And then to have the experience as football clubs here domestically to be able to go up against that on a regular basis would be, first of all, a huge challenge for everybody here, but it would give you a taste of that quality that you need to reach in order to get to that level. Although it will come at a cost. It will come at a cost in that leagues will be a formality. Cups will be a formality. How can we even compete against something like that? I mean, it's already so difficult as it is to even win one game against them, not the league against them. To just win one game against them is difficult as it is. And if you look at the points tally between Ceres and Kaya, it's quite a distance. But to look at Kaya and everybody else is also quite a bit of a gap. So Kaya is not a horrible team, but in comparison to Ceres, there is a gap that needs to be filled there. And if they even go up a few levels, a few notches, that gap is going to be so huge. And it's going to be interesting how that affects the game. There's going to be a little bit of, obviously, the drama of who's going to win the league is going to be different, but maybe perhaps there will be other reasons for people to watch the league and to get involved in those games. I mean, I don't think it's going to be an end to wanting to watch the games. I don't think that's going to be that kind of situation, but it's certainly going to take away a little bit of the anticipation and the drama of the league. But then again, if somebody causes an upset, then it makes it even bigger, a bigger thing. So yeah.
Are we going to now see a bunch of other clubs trying to naturalize their players? Is Amasa Amora going to be naturalized now, as someone who's been in the Philippines for a number of years? Like, is this again, going back to what I said before, not just a precedent with the national team, but is this going to set a precedent with the clubs? Or is this quite a difficult process? Do you need to have the connections in order to make that happen? And do you see that as being more of an isolated example by trying to take 2 of the highest caliber players that we've currently got in the PFL and trying to naturalize them? And that's why perhaps on a government level we might be willing to make that happen? Or do you see that as being something that will end up being blanket across all clubs clambering to try and naturalize their players who've been here for a sustained period of time?
I think it's the 5-6 years that's going to be the issue. And it's not enough that you have been here for 5 to 6 years. You're going to need to be an exemplary player. You know what I mean? It's going to be, you're going to have to be able to contribute to the national cause. So if you're a good enough player to be a star player, for example, for a lesser club, but not enough to really be a star at the Azkals level, then the government is not going to be incentivized to want to naturalize you um, the same way that Robert would be or Bienville would be, because their track records speak for themselves. So, is Masanari Omura going to be a type of player that it is going to be a shoe-in into our national team? I don't think so. I think he's a great player, but also, his age is going to become a factor, obviously, but he's not the type of player that's going to barge into the national team and take Manny Ott's spot. You know what I mean? So I think it has to be an exemplary, a special type of player.
Okay. Very interesting. Very interesting. I think just to summarize again, my real take on it is, you can take the naturalization thing and you can make of it what you want, but ultimately, I think in order, and I make this point for a number of different things, but in order for that process to be acknowledged, supported and embraced by the footballing public, you've got to temper that with initiatives that you're doing to satisfy the local community, and that needs to be done now. It needs to be done now. People will be far more forgiving of these types of scenarios if they're putting on a program on their doorstep to try to engage with 5, 6, 7-year-old kids. If they're trying to do pilot programs to develop the best U14, U16, U18 national team players. People will be more forgiving if they're really trying to engage the fans of the national team when they come to Rizal and give them a really good fan experience. All of these things would filter into supporting whatever decision the federation or the government decide in order to maximize the potential of the team. If you're not doing those things, fans are naturally going to be disenfranchised, disillusioned, and they're going to pick on the finer points, no matter what your motives are. Even if your motivation is, I want to try to build the best team possible, people are going to be like, just getting in like regular foreigners now, just to try and take us to the next level. It's not good enough. Why are you not engaging with me as a fan? Why are you not engaging with me as a parent? Why are you not engaging my kid who wants to become the next Philippine footballer? So I think a lot of those things can be smoothed over. I think you made a great point with Mendy being more Filipino than perhaps some of the Filipino players. He's probably more Filipino than me, to be honest with you, in many respects. And I played 51 times. So who am I to judge? And I'm not going to be the one to make that call. And they're well within their rights to assume that naturalization certification. So if that's the case, I've got no qualms about them going ahead and pursuing that. I just think that there needs to be that caveat of, okay, if we're going to go ahead and do this, we have to anticipate there's going to be a backlash, and we need to be on the front foot with whatever PR initiative we need to go to in order to make sure that people think that there still is an even footing, irrespective of whether you're a young Filipino coming through the system or whether you're a naturalized player who's been there for 5 years. That, for me, is the overarching thing with that.
Going to be very interesting to see how things unfold over the next few weeks. As always, fun chat, Chris. Hope you're doing well over there. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it, mate. Yep. Sorry about the technical issues. Unfortunately, didn't get to see my ugly mug as much as perhaps you would have wanted. But hopefully the dulcet tones made up for it. And we'll endeavour to try and get it right for the next time. I'm anticipating we're going to do a few more of these in the upcoming weeks while we're on quarantine. So fingers crossed the next one will be a little more slick.
Thanks to everybody who tuned in. We hope you guys garnered something from that conversation. If you like the content that we provide here on Across the Line, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube, Spotify, and on Apple Podcasts. Rate and review the show, and please spread it to all of your friends. We really do appreciate the support you guys throw our way. All right, that's it for us here on this Football Friday, and we hope to catch you next time here on Across the Line.